Hello guys, welcome to my channel. I hope you're doing fantastic. I have a question for you today. Have you ever considered being invisible from a difficult situation in your life? Well, regardless of what we think, scientists have already given a serious thought of inventing such a suit which can make you invisible in recent future. But again, have you ever thought what disaster it could bring in your life if someone who doesn't like you become invisible? Well, let's find that out together and begin our story of a movie named The Invisible Man, which deals with the same story of someone being invisible. It is a movie which released in 2020, which directed by Lee Wannell. Frankly speaking, I really liked this movie because it has a lot of surprising factors in it. So, without wasting any further time, let's begin the story. In the very initial scene, we can see a woman whose name was Cecilia. She has a boyfriend named Adrian who was very rich and even talented. But that wasn't what Cecilia was looking for. Cecilia wanted someone who cares for her and puts her ahead of him. But Adrian was exactly opposite of what she had wanted from a boyfriend. He was violent and abusive to her, and he had caged Cecilia's freedom. That was the reason why Cecilia had drugged Adrian one night and she tried to escape from his house. Adrian also had a dog named Zeus, and that night when Cecilia was trying to execute her escape plan, by mistake, Zeus triggers the alarm of Adrian's car. But as everything was already planned, Cecilia was successful in reaching the road where she was waiting for her sister Emily. She already had informed Emily to be there on around that time. Soon, Emily arrives there and Cecilia gets inside her car. And they were just about to leave when Adrian comes and breaks the window of Emily's car. Adrian actually didn't want Cecilia to go, but Cecilia wanted her freedom back. Emily drove off, but in this hurried situation, Cecilia dropped the drug which she had been given Adrian. After they left, Adrian found the bottle and he understands that Cecilia had drugged him. Adrian was really angry because of Cecilia's departure. Anyways, Cecilia starts to live her life with her friend James, who was a police officer, and he had a daughter named Sydney. Cecilia was so traumatized that she didn't even go out of the house even for a single moment because of the fear of Adrian. After a couple of weeks, Emily comes to visit Cecilia at James' house, but Cecilia wasn't happy about it. She thought Adrian could follow Emily and he could track her down. But Emily didn't come there alone. She brought news with her. Emily told Cecilia a surprising news that Adrian has committed suicide and he is dead. Later on, someone sends a letter for Cecilia, which was actually weird because nobody knew where Cecilia lived. Anyways, that letter had been sent by somebody named Tom, who was a brother and lawyer of Adrian. Emily and Cecilia went to meet Tom and he informs that Adrian has left $5 million for Cecilia and the amount is fragmented into $100,000 a month for about next 4 years. Cecilia accepts the money and she also opens an account where she would deposit $10,000 a month for Sydney to go to college. Cecilia had assumed that everything is going to be perfect now. But just after that, Cecilia starts experiencing some weird things, like while making breakfast, stove catches fire. Whenever she goes for an interview, she finds her document file empty as if someone had taken the documents out. During one interview, Cecilia suddenly falls ill and in the reports, doctors find that she had a lot of diazepam in her blood. Diazepam was the same drug Cecilia had used on Adrian on the day of her escape, and she finds the same drug when she comes home to James. Now it was a question how that drug got back to Cecilia because it was even the same bottle. One day when Cecilia was out, we could see breathing in the form of cold air behind Cecilia. It really means that something was on to Cecilia. One day when Cecilia and Sydney were sleeping, that invisible power takes their blanket off and starts taking their photographs. Cecilia wakes up because of it and she finds her blanket on the ground. She picks it up and she feels as if someone is standing on the blanket. Cecilia was terrified because of these experiences. Next day, Cecilia takes James with her and both of them go to Tom, where Cecilia tells Tom that Adrian is still alive and somehow he has found a way of becoming invisible. Obviously, James and Tom didn't believe her. That was the reason why Cecilia goes to Emily, but Emily was kind of upset because Emily had received an email from Cecilia's ID where she had used a very harsh language and told Emily to stay away from her. Only Cecilia doesn't remember sending this email to Emily because she hasn't. Cecilia comes back home where she finds that sent email and she breaks down again. At the very moment, Sydney comes over to her and tries to comfort her, but that invisible power hits Sydney and Sydney feels as if Cecilia had hit her. Sydney shouts and calls James because of this and he was very upset on Cecilia and he takes Sydney away from her. Cecilia was really upset, even psychologically, and because of that, she sets coffee powder on the ground just to capture the footprints of that invisible power. She also takes a knife and waits for it to come over to her. But as expected, invisible power doesn't reveal itself, and that's why, on a hunch, Cecilia calls Adrian, and surprisingly, she hears Adrian's phone ringing from attic of James's house. Cecilia goes to attic and she finds Adrian's phone, some keys, and floor plan of a house. Cecilia checks Adrian's phone where she finds her picture, which had been clicked by that invisible power. She also receives text message from an unknown number saying surprise. Cecilia checks the opening of the attic and quickly she drops paint over it, and because of that, the invisible man gets revealed. She comes down quickly and finds sink tap open where he must have cleaned himself. Just a moment after, that invisible man attacks Cecilia and becomes violent. After a struggle, Cecilia somehow finds her way out of the house. Here, Cecilia had become very determined to have some answers about what the hell is going on in her life. That's why she calls a cab and reaches to Adrian's house where she finds a very ingeniously made suit which, if someone wears, can become invisible. She takes that suit and hides it in a closet. She comes back into hall where that invisible man again attacks her, but Zeus here comes to save her and buys Cecilia a moment which she uses to flee from the scene. Without wasting any further time, Cecilia calls Emily and asks her to meet in a public place where she thinks they will be safe. But for a moment, she had forgotten that the power she was dealing with was invisibility. Cecilia was trying to make Emily understand how much she loves Emily, but suddenly that invisible man comes over and slits throat of Emily with a knife and sets the knife in Cecilia's hand. People around her start to believe Cecilia killed Emily. Obviously, police arrest Cecilia, and in defense, she tries to make everybody understand the reason and person behind it. But nobody believes her and they set her in a prison. To stabilize her, doctors give her injection, and before she goes to sleep, someone comes near her and says, surprise. Here we come to understand that invisible man was also there locked in the cell with Cecilia. During one medical checkup in the prison cell, Cecilia comes to find out that she is pregnant, and that was shocking because when she was with Adrian, she was using birth control pills. So she doesn't understand her pregnancy. When officer and James interrogate Cecilia, then she informs them about Adrian and his presence in the room. James believes that Cecilia's medical condition is not at all stable and he blames himself because he had left her alone. Later, Tom comes to visit Cecilia and says the money that Adrian had left her would be stopped now because of the criminal charges that Cecilia was facing. But everything would be alright if Cecilia comes back to Adrian. Here, Tom reveals that Adrian was still alive and Cecilia rejects his proposal, but she also steals a pen from suitcase of Tom. Tom and Adrian were in on framing Cecilia for these criminal charges. Cecilia tries to cut herself with a pen she had stolen from Tom, expecting the invisible man to reveal, and he comes there to stop her. Cecilia, on the other hand, stabs him and damages the suit in the process, making him partially visible. Because of these noises, security comes over there, but invisible man kills them all and gets himself out of the station. Cecilia follows him in the parking lot with a gun, and there invisible man again overpowers her and threatens to kill Sydney, leaving Cecilia unharmed because she was pregnant and carrying Adrian's child. Cecilia warns James by calling him immediately, and she also gets a car and reaches to James's house to save Sydney. Invisible man already had arrived in the house and he attacks Sydney, but she uses pepper spray on him to distract him and she gets away for some time from him. James also had arrived over there, but invisible man beats him badly. Cecilia uses fire extinguisher on invisible man, making him visible again, and this time she shoots him dead. She opens the mask of that suit and she finds Tom, which was absolutely shocking. Meanwhile, police search Adrian's house and find him in the basement tied with ropes. He informs police that Tom was the one behind it. Police had a clear reason to believe that Tom was the one orchestrated this whole drama, but Cecilia doesn't believe this fact and she tells James the truth. She tells James that this is still Adrian and he is manipulating everybody again as this is his expertise. To prove the point, Cecilia makes a plan where she sets a dinner date with Adrian and she had a microphone on her so that James can hear the conversation between Cecilia and Adrian. Cecilia accepts what Adrian wanted. She accepts the relationship with Adrian as well as the child she had with him, but she poses one condition in front of Adrian and says he has to come clean and accepts the fact that he did everything and he was the reason behind misery of Cecilia. But Adrian was far more meticulous than what Cecilia had thought. Adrian wanted Cecilia to live with him and he also wanted the child. So Adrian reveals his identity and says surprise to Cecilia, sending a message that he was the one behind everything. Cecilia was convinced that Adrian is the reason behind her misery, but what Adrian said was not enough to convict Adrian for his actions. Cecilia excuses herself to use washroom, and just in that moment, we viewers could see that Adrian slits her own throat and commits suicide, which is recorded in the security camera. When Cecilia comes back, seeing the bleeding situation of Adrian, she calls 911 for an ambulance to help Adrian out. Carefully, Cecilia takes a step back to avoid being captured in the security camera, and she taunts Adrian and says his magic word, surprise. It clearly means that Adrian hadn't committed suicide. Cecilia had killed him. Because there was a microphone on Cecilia, James could hear everything, and he comes running inside and finds Cecilia and asks exactly what had happened. Cecilia tells him that Adrian has committed suicide. James could see the invisible suit in her bag which she was holding, but he chose to accept the story told by Cecilia and confirms that Adrian had committed suicide out of his guilt. Because of this incident of suicide, Cecilia now finds herself free and confident as well, and movie ends here. Now you must be wondering how exactly Cecilia killed Adrian. If you remember, Cecilia had stashed a suit in one compartment when she had visited Adrian's house earlier. So when she made an excuse of using washroom, she must have gone to that compartment and used that suit to become invisible and then forcibly cut Adrian's throat. Thanks to the invisible suit, security camera couldn't capture this and everybody would think Adrian had committed suicide. In this movie, we also see Invisible Man saying surprise word more often than usual, and when Adrian uses surprise word one last time with Cecilia, we come to find out that he was the one behind everything. He also had manipulated his brother into committing this crime just to ensure his plan of getting Cecilia and the unborn child back. So this was the story of the Invisible Man, and I hope you like it. And I recommend you to watch the movie as well because you will enjoy it. Tell me how do you like this explanation as well in the comment section, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye.